Welcome back to Nate the Hate, where I am joined by my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer.
What's up, Nate? Great to be here.
It's good to have you here for a very technical discussion today. As we both saw this week, the Nintendo Switch got a firmware update to 10.0, and with it came a shocking reveal that there is a new profile SKU in the firmware update code that suggests Nintendo has yet another Nintendo Switch revision in the works. And this information, of course, led to the wild speculation that it has to be a Nintendo Switch Pro. And, well, that doesn't look to be the case.
What? I'm disappointed.
I know. We've been hearing about the Switch Pro since at least 2016. I mean, before the Switch even launched. And it looks like we're going to be hearing about a Switch Pro probably until Switch 2 comes out. And even then, I don't think we're safe from the Switch Pro rumors. So what happened with the firmware update is that a code known as NXABCD was found, and a data miner put it out there saying, well, this new profile has evidence of a secondary display, and it's going to be added exclusively to this model. And, that made a lot of people wonder, a secondary screen. Are we getting a Switch DS type of product? Are we getting a VR solution? What could this product actually be? Or maybe is it just a bit of misinformation that's being misconstrued by the data miner? And, what we're going to address is, what can we realistically be looking at if Nintendo were to introduce a third SKU of the Switch well, let's put this right out. There is no chance new hardware from Nintendo is coming in 2020 based on this code leak. Correct?
Yeah, man. I mean, also, let's not forget the current situation that's going on, which is right at its peak right now, right? I mean, we have to consider that even if things were full steam ahead operational, and I know we've talked about this before, but I mean, we're looking at shortages of the Switch around the world. Do we really believe that, there is assuming there was a new revision Switch that was coming this year, that there would be a chance that there would be one coming out this year, given everything that's happening? I seriously doubt it, even if it was something that was on the cards.
Right. You would definitely expect that their internal plans have shuffled a bit, whether due to delays in production lines, difficulties in getting the products necessary from, suppliers. So, I mean, right now I'd remove the 2020 expectation. We also had Nintendo back in January say, point blank, without even being asked, they went right to a slide in their investors briefing and said no new hardware in 2020. And they would not have done that unprompted unless they were 100% committed to the idea of having no new hardware in 2020.
Right.
And one thing people do have to remember is that way back in 2018 is when we first heard of the Marco chip appearing in the Nintendo Switch firmware code.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't release until 2019. So I'd say based on that, if we're looking at a similar situation here, it would mean we're not seeing a product from Nintendo probably until, at the earliest, I would say April or May of 2021.
Right. And I guess to add to that, Nate, let's walk through a couple of things with the viewers or the listeners, because, I mean, first of all, Mike Heskin, he's a very reputable source. So, people may be wondering, well, who's Mike Heskin and where did he get this information from? Mike Heskin is one of a couple of people that have been involved in the Switch hacking scene pretty much since the start. So he's very, very versed on this stuff. So if he says that he's found, a string in the firmware for NXABCD, and I believe he found new DRAM profiles, all that stuff. I mean, you got to take that for what it's worth. That's legitimate. But I think, we need to be realistic about, what we think is what this is, and when we think it's coming. First of all, it's not coming out this year. I mean, I think that's you're quite right. You called that pretty well. But also to add to that, we have to remember that look, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, any technology company is always inventing or coming up with new designs, new prototypes, new revisions. The die chip could be reduced. The power draw could be reduced. There's always things that are being developed in the R&D labs. R&D is a constant thing for these companies, and I'm not saying that this is just something that's in a prototype that we'll never see, but it's something that you're quite right in that it's probably, I'll say, 12 to 18 months out from something that we'll ever see. And I guess the fun part now is really trying to speculate what that means. I like you, I mean, I don't think this is the Switch Pro because that doesn't really fit with anything that Nintendo mentioned in their investors meeting and in the past, and it doesn't really fit with what we're seeing coming out of this new firmware revision. So then what really is what we're looking at? Dual screens, I mean, it could be VR, but based on Lavo, I mean, I doubt it's a VR solution, because even if it was, then what does that mean for performance and all that? It just doesn't fit with me. But on the flip side, Nintendo's always been a company that has come up with some weird and wacky designs and ideas sometimes that none of us have really seen. And I'm using things like, Ring Fit, Lavo, and some of these, add-ons that they've come out with. So who knows? This could be and I've heard rumors of a TV-only Switch where it's just, it's completely docked, or on the flip side, a digital-only Switch where there's no cartridge port, where it's just, you just download all the games off the eShop. Or it could be anything. So, I mean, I guess the fun part of this discussion is trying to figure out what we think it is. I mean, do you have any thoughts on what you think it might be?
I mean, my initial reaction was that it would likely be a TV-only Switch, because when you look at the product line of the Switch, we have the Switch Original, which is the flagship, in which you can dock and undock. We then have the Lite, which was a cheaper alternative for those who may not dock their system and just want the portable play. It's more affordable. And then you would think the natural progression would be, now we're going to release another affordable SKU, and it's just going to be a docked Switch, because not everybody plays portably. Mm-hmm. So you cover all of the market needs, because there are people who leave their current Switch docked at all times. They don't care about the handheld or undocked play. So if you can release a docked only Switch for, let's say, the same price as the Switch Lite at $199, there is a market for it. And R&D for the most part would already be done, because based on the coding found is that whatever this new product is still going to use the Mariko chip.
Right.
So it's going to be the exact same internals as the Switch version 2 or the Switch Lite. So they can put it in a nice little, container, little box, and you can play the games on your TV, maybe package it with a Pro controller, sell it for $199, and there is a market for it. So to Nintendo, it is a low risk investment, and it's going to have high profit margins.
Yeah.
That's exactly what a company like Nintendo is going to look for, is who can we sell this to? Is there a market for it? Yes. Can we make money on this? Yes. And it doesn't need to sell, 10 million units to be profitable for them. Like this, some people are going to compare it to the PlayStation Vita TV. The key difference is that the Vita TV, while a good product, even from a technological and an engineering standpoint, its flaw was the Vita did not have software people wanted to play.
Yeah.
That's not a problem with the Switch.
Also, it was hardly compatible with the Vita anyway, because half the games wouldn't work because of the touch controls and stuff, if you recall.
That's right. So, I know some people say, well, you have games like Ring Fit. Those are difficult to play on the Switch Lite because you can't really hold it. You'd have to prop it up with a kickstand or a box to lean it on or something. Well, a TV only Switch alleviates that, and it would be compatible with every single Switch game. So, like, that makes sense in the natural order of things. The only caveat is that way back in 2017, in firmware 2.0, there was code found of NX-ABCB, and that is believed to be a console only system. Now, this is something we have yet to see. This is now 3 years on, where since that code was found, and there is no product to suggest, this is coming out soon. There's nothing. We haven't seen anything. So that then shifts me to the idea of a digital only Switch. And I mean, this code ends in D, D as in digital.
Yep.
A digital only Switch, to me, I don't know if it's a wise move.
Well, I mean, it could be. It could be a wise move. I mean, you're probably going to compare it to like the Xbox SAD, which is not a great comparison, I guess. But think of it this way, like, so many people in the world want to play Animal Crossing. The cheapest price to do that would be $199 plus $60. So if there was a way to get that $199 down to say $150, then that would be a lot more appealing. Potentially selling as a bundle for $199 to $200. You get a Switch plus Animal Crossing. All of a sudden, that is very compelling. I'm not saying that Nintendo is going to drop the price that much, but if you make it digital only, take away the cartridge, the slot for the cartridge, and offer essentially the same features as the Switch Lite, but only as a TV only Switch Lite. In other words, there's no rumble, there's all that stuff is gone. And that may be something potentially interesting, or maybe it's just a Switch Lite minus a cartridge port, and it's a handheld only Switch. But I think if this is something that we will see, I would say it's definitely on the cheaper end versus the more expensive end, because it doesn't make any sense to offer anything more up market at this time. I think it's a look at the low end. What can we sell for $150? And because they're going to sell millions of these things, especially like I said with an Animal Crossing bundle or a Pokemon bundle or whatever else, Breath of the Wild 2 potentially. It could be a big, huge system seller for them.
Yeah, and that's where, like, when you see manufacturers, they go one of two ways. They go the low end, where they try to reduce price to expand the user base, but it's still profitable for them. Or you go towards the high end with a more premium product, like we saw with Sony and Microsoft when they released the PlayStation 4 Pro or the Xbox One X, is that you charge more because you're going to make higher profit margins on those products, because like the Xbox One X didn't cost Microsoft $500 to make. It was significantly lower, but because it's a premium product and they position it for the enthusiast who needs to have the best, they make a lot more money on that product. And right now, we still haven't seen a price drop on the launch Switch. So Nintendo is still sitting there at that $300 price point. So I don't see the need for them to go to a more premium SKU and try to hit that $350 or even $400 price point, because it won't do them any favors. And I mean, based on the coding, if it is accurate and Mariko is still the chip inside, there's no reason for them, because Mariko, it's a powerful chip. Nintendo is not using it to its full capacity.
Oh, definitely not. Not even close to its full capacity, I might add.
Right. They basically looked at it and said, this is more efficient. We're going to use its technological advancements, and we're going to preserve battery life. We're going to make that the focus on the Switch version 2 and the Switch Lite, even though there's a lot of overhead where they could have pushed performance of games like, I'll use Mario Odyssey as an example. Right now it renders, I believe, at 900p on a Switch, where there's enough overhead with the Mariko chip, that they could have pushed it to 1080p, and it wouldn't have broke a sweat to do that. So do you think there's any chance that we could see Nintendo potentially drop the price of the Switch Lite moving into 2021, reduce that to 150, reduce the current Switch, we'll say to 250, and release, we'll say, the NX ABCD as a premium Switch at $300, but instead of just preserving that battery, the battery goes back to about 5 hours,
Right.
but you're going to get those resolution and frames per second boost by utilizing Mariko to its fullest. You think that's any possibility?
I would say zero possibility. And it all goes back to, I mean, I know I'm harping on about this, but man, this pandemic around the world is really taking its toll on people. You know, there's record unemployment, there's uncertainty in the world. Do you really think do you think Nintendo is gearing up to get we'll say a premium Switch ready to go next year? Do you think, what would make more sense is like the low end scenario? Man, it's hard for me to imagine that. And maybe I'm wrong, because like there is a shortage of Switches right now and people want them, and people are scalping them and they're being bought up. So maybe my way of thinking is completely off, but I'm just thinking about the average person that wants to get one, but right now is like, oh, I can't commit to that right now. That's not something that I'm willing to do. But having said that, I mean, let's say it's 12 months from now, situation in the world may be a lot more improved. Things may be back to normal, hopefully. It may be the right time to announce something. I don't know. I can't see it personally, but, if you look at history, there's the new 3DS and the new 2DS, with the boost in power, the slight increases. Will they do something here again? Maybe. But I would say, I don't know. My gut tells me that they're going lower end versus higher end. I think there will be a time where they do, I'll say, stealthily tweak clocks and memory speeds and stuff. But honestly, Nate, I think that's something they'll just drop in some type of firmware revision, and they won't even tell anyone about. You know what I'm saying? I think that's like the boost mode thing that they added last year, where some games can boost up their clocks to increase loading speeds and then drop them back down for the game. I would say it's something more along those lines versus we'll say a new Switch or a Switch Premium that has, we'll say, a 15 to 20% increase in performance. It sounds really cool, and man, if I'm wrong, I hope I am, because that sounds like a system that I would want to get my hands on. But I don't know, man. Like, I think for me, it's really all about getting Switch out to as many people and as many houses as possible. And I think the way that they do it is just offer the kind of, we'll say, the extreme low end, where it's just literally the system without a cartridge port, and and you connect it to the eShop, and you've got a pick of all those amazing eShop sales that are going on right now, and you can have a lot of fun with not much money and really enjoy a really awesome handheld or a really awesome system.
I guess the only problem that could arise from a digital-only Switch would be something similar that we saw with the PlayStation Portable Go, is memory.
Yes, that's true.
Like, Nintendo right now limits us to 32 gigabytes of storage, and we can upgrade with the micro SDs, which they are fairly affordable, but games on the Switch are growing in size. If I want to play BioShock on the Switch, even if I buy it physically, I still need, I think it's 16 or 18 gigabytes, or XCOM requires like another 20 gigabyte download, even if you buy it physical.
Yep.
So a digital only Switch, you're still going to run into those, the storage problems where you might need a 400 gigabyte or, maybe a 1 terabyte card. Or do you think Nintendo would upgrade from 32 to maybe a 64 or 128? But that is, it's going to be more pricey to
Yeah.
them as the company where they're not saving money now.
Well, if they upgrade, then that makes me lean towards the premium model because let's say you get 64 on the digital Switch, right? But everything else has 32. That kind of doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think if it's going to be an increase, then yeah, I mean, I would say it sounds more like a digital Switch to me. Sorry, a premium Switch to me than a digital Switch. But I think look, I think there's really nothing off the table as far as what this is. But a premium Switch it just doesn't seem like it fits right now, with everything. And Nintendo has to be thinking about that, and maybe that's what this is. Maybe this is their placeholder for that. But will we actually see it, 12 months from now or in 2021? We might, but it could be holiday 2021 before we see something. I just wonder if the pandemic has made them question their schedule as far as what they had up their sleeves with we'll say a premium Switch.
Yeah, it's definitely a question people have to ponder on. And another one I would question as like Nintendo is we're entering, well, not entering, but next year's 2021, which will be actually be entering the fifth year of the Switch's life cycle. Now that's typically towards the end of a console's life cycle. We usually get 4 to 5 years, though the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii generation lasted, far longer. We were 8 to 9 years that generation. But the PS4 and the Xbox One are going a more traditional life cycle where we're going to see their replacements later this year. And so what did they got? What, 7 years each?
Yep, 7 years.
So if I'm Nintendo, it doesn't really suit my interest to release a Switch Pro in 2021 because they're probably realistically looking at a successor in possibly, late 2022 or early 2023. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like you need a stopgap for just, an 18 to 20 month period because we've already seen some developers like Virtuos out of China say, we're going to try porting some PS5 and Xbox Series X games to Switch. And a big thing with this upcoming generation is we're not seeing major engine advancements. Like we're not seeing the introduction of Unreal Engine 5.
Yep.
We're not seeing like a Unity 2.0. We're not seeing those type of advances. So right now the Switch is, in terms of technology, it's still compatible with these engines, even though they're moving to substantially more powerful hardware, but these engines are still scalable. And that's not to say every game can be scaled to Switch performance. Like we just had Square came out with Final Fantasy VII Remake. And yes, it's on Unreal Engine 4, but that doesn't mean the game can be scaled to run adequately on the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of developers are also still going to hang back and release their games on the PS4 and Xbox One probably for the first at least 18 months because third parties still want to go to that base. It's a base of 150 million people.
Yeah.
And you don't just abandon that just because the introduction of next gen hardware and the fact that Series X and PS5 are going to be backwards compatible, you will always have a lot of cross-gen releases, and the Switch can benefit from that.
Yep.
So, I mean, if I'm Nintendo, from just an economic standpoint, there's no point to, position a Pro in 2020, 2021, or 2022 because their planning has to be to get a successor out, and they're still limited by what NVIDIA has available in terms of their mobile chipsets.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you think about the Wii U, right? The Wii U was a failure on so many levels, but one of the biggest ones that I heard from developers was it's difficult to make games on the Wii U because it was literally one iteration of Unreal Engine behind. You know what I mean? And the amount of time that would have been taken would be significant for a porting job. And in the end, most companies just said, screw it, we don't care. We're not even going to bother. The Wii U was a failure for many reasons, but from a development standpoint, that was definitely one of the big ones. The Switch is very fortunate to be in a very good situation right now, and you touched on it. You're right, Unreal Engine 4 isn't going to go away anytime soon. It's going to be the engine that's being used probably for the next 1 to 2 years after we see the launch of the next generation consoles. Everything is going to be running on Unreal Engine 4 for the foreseeable future and Unity, which means there is a path to the Switch as far as ports. Now, again, you were right. Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't going to run on the Switch anytime soon, but anything could be potentially ported on the Switch. It really just depends on how much investment the studio is willing to put into making it work. Virtuos, CD Projekt Red, Saber, they are obviously very skilled at this stuff. Panic Button, they know how to make really good ports, but they've also put in a lot of money to making their understanding of the porting process very, very good. Now, once we start seeing Unreal Engine 5 start to take over, I mean, it hasn't even been announced yet, right? So it's going to be ways away, but Unreal Engine 5, once we hear about that or the next version of Unity, that's when, if I was Nintendo, I'd be thinking, developers are going to start asking us about what's next, because we want to make our games run on the Switch. We want to port our games to the Switch, but all of a sudden now we're in a situation where we are a step behind everyone else, the industry. What does that mean for us? Does that mean now Nintendo needs to start thinking about the next level of hardware? Now, obviously, Nintendo would get ahead of it before that situation occurred, but yeah, I don't see any reason for we'll say a Switch Pro anytime soon until we start to get close to that scenario, which isn't going to happen for a while. So, and again, we've seen some amazing ports to the Switch, which I think will continue to happen over the next year and a half, 2 years. So yeah, I mean, the Switch Pro for me doesn't make any sense. The premium Switch, as you mentioned, possibly could be something, but I find it difficult to imagine that people would pay more money for we'll say a premium Switch that has, we'll say, 64 megabytes of SD and slightly boosted clocks and slightly faster RAM. I just think that Nintendo is going to continue with what has made them so much money over the last 3 years, and that is their bread and butter. And if they've figured out a way to reduce that in some way, but still provide we'll say, the Switch experience and games and everything, then I think that's the path that they're going to take.
So I'm going to introduce a crazy idea that Nintendo could take with this NX ABCD product. But before I do that, out of the three possibilities of a digital only, a TV only, or a Switch Pro using Mariko to the fullest, which of those three would you say is the most likely in your opinion?
I'd probably say the base one, the cheaper end of the scale, I think is the most like for me.
Okay, so now I'm going to introduce an idea that is ludicrous on paper. It's going to cause some of the listeners to tweak their heads to the side like a confused puppy dog, and they're going to say, what the hell is Nate talking about? But I think this could be a realistic idea that I could see Nintendo having experimented with and possibly moving forward with if they were able to successfully test it. And that is a wireless docking solution, which by that I mean something similar to what we have seen from Apple AirPlay or Android Smart View, where I can have the Switch in my hand and via Bluetooth, I could connect it to my television or another product, and I then dock my Switch to this display. And with the mention of a second screen in the code, that's where my mind kind of went with this is could Nintendo be testing almost a reverse Wii U type of situation where
Right.
I can dock my Switch wirelessly and that would cover the second screen part. I guess you could say the D in the code is dock. If not that the code actually, not that the letters really correspond to anything, necessarily. But what would you think if Nintendo came out with a normal Switch and a Switch Lite line that allowed you to play in handheld and wirelessly dock the system to a monitor or a TV?
I think it's freaking genius. Honestly, if that's what the speculation is, or what your speculation is, that makes a lot of sense. So you're essentially saying, like, you can cast your phone to a TV. You're basically casting the handheld light to any display that is suitable for it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and in effect, you're docking the handheld, you're docking the console, but you're still playing it in your hand, right? So
I guess
technically
I
it's
guess
in
you could
dock
use it.
mode, but you're still playing it as you normally would.
Yeah, I guess you could still hold like the Switch Lite or the Switch itself as a controller, and
Right.
the image is just no longer in front of you. Now it's on the television
I
in
think
front of you.
I think that's freaking genius, dude. If that's really what the second screen is meant for, that makes a ton of sense. So think of it this way: you bring your Switch Lite to your friend's house. You want to play Mario Kart on these two Switch Lites, but you really want to play it on a big screen with your friend. You only have Switch Lites to do it, and I'm using the Switch Lite as the example. I'm not saying that's what it's going to have, but that makes a lot of sense to me. If you have the ability to then basically pull it up on a big screen TV, absolutely, that sounds like a really good selling point to me that people would get very excited about.
Because yeah, 'cause something we've seen with the Switch Lite is that there's still some buyers just have to say, "Oh, I wish I could have docked this to the television, even if it's still rendered at 720p or whatever." They still wish they had that option, but Nintendo took it out because they wanted the Lite just to be a portable only device. And now that would offer the best of both worlds without having to lug around that big, hideous dock. And like the idea, it's intriguing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if everyone's gonna be able to wrap their head around this concept, even though we have seen it from, mobile providers with the phones where I can cast YouTube right to my television from my phone. If Nintendo was able to get this working and working without, noticeable input lag or any significant loss in visual fidelity, it seems like a great solution to the whole docking situation of while you're on the go.
Yep.
Because if I'm going to the hotel and I want to bring my Switch, I don't want to have to lug around the dock. If I can just boom, I wirelessly do it. I put the Switch on the entertainment center, sitting beside it, and I have a controller and I'm laying back in the bed and I'm playing it. That's awesome. I can even just plug it in through a normal charging cable
Yeah.
with the USB-C at the bottom, and I'm playing.
Man, there are still people that are convinced that you can connect a Switch Lite to a display where there is zero way to do that. Like, I don't know how many videos and tech videos I've seen, and I've done a teardown of the hardware as well. But there are people that are just unhappy about it, and this would be Nintendo's response to that. Well, you can have a Switch Lite, but hey, by the way, you can also cast it or have it display on a Bluetooth compatible television at 1080p. I think it's ingenious, man. But my question is, there is always going to be some processing power that's required to do this. Do they use the Marico chip with boosted performance to take advantage of the casting features, but then leave, I'll say, games and everything else at stock clocks? Or do they introduce new hardware which has we'll say a dedicated chip that manages this for us? I would probably say there'd be a dedicated chip to do it. But if you think about like a phone, like I can cast YouTube to my television and have 1080p 60 without breaking a sweat. It just works. So whatever technology phones have, I would say that Nintendo could offer a very similar thing with the new Switch.
Yeah, I would think they would probably stick with Mariko and they would just boost the performance that they could do in, every recently released Switch. And I mean, that's where when I look at that information put out by Mike Heskin of saying, this is a new hardware type, there's evidence of a secondary display of sorts being added exclusively to this model. I could just see, maybe it's not branded as just a Switch or Switch Lite. It's, the Switch Cast
Yeah.
or something like that, where it is the next iteration of their line, and it has, a new branding for marketing's sake to its title. And like, it does sound like it has to be its own thing because they do have to take advantage of that extra processing power to, be able to cast the image and everything. So that seems like the most intriguing and ingenious idea I could see Nintendo possibly exploring if we are to see another iteration to the Switch line beyond just, the TV only one. Because the TV only one, it does cater to a market. There is a need for that product. But this one, it just goes the next step. And I could also see Nintendo experimenting with this idea for when it comes time for them to release the Switch successor, to already have this technology ready and working. So when it comes time to launch Switch 2, we're not going to have that big, hefty, ugly dock in the corner. It's going to be, we can wirelessly do this. And that can be game changing.
I agree, man. I think you've kind of indicated a piece of the market that wants something like this, because we heard when the Lite came out that, hey, this is cool, I love the price, but God, I wish I could have this docked on my television. And a lot of people didn't buy it for that reason. And then those same people that want to get a Switch didn't want to spend the $299 because they felt like maybe it was a little, too expensive. So if they can somehow come up with a solution that either sits between those two, or maybe it's a little cheaper than the Lite, or again, maybe they drop the price of the Lite and then kind of slot this in at the $199 price. I think that makes a ton of sense, man. Like, I could see a lot of people getting excited about something like that, because I hear that so many times from people about the Lite, how it's not even a Switch anymore, it's just a handheld. Well, this will be a Switch again, and if they offer that, I think that's a very smart idea. And hopefully, secondary displays. I mean, look, is it going to be like a 3DS or a DS type thing? No, you're not going to just have like a foldable Switch that has two screens. That makes zero sense to me. But a secondary display where you're casting to that display, and maybe it's not even casting, Nate. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's thinking about the Wii U again. It's like you've got a separate screen on your handheld and you're playing the game on the big screen, and all of a sudden now you've got like a head-up display, or you've got a map on your Switch, and then you've got the actual game on your... There's all sorts of possibilities here, and Nintendo is very well versed at this stuff. They've done this before, so maybe it's not just I'm casting my Switch to my television. Maybe it's I am now offering an experience here that you would not get on a regular Switch at this time.
Right. And I mean, when I think of, because there's going to be a lot of speculation going around. A lot of them are just going to lean into that Switch Pro. I think this idea is far more exciting.
Yeah.
This is something you're probably not going to hear on anyone else's podcast or YouTube video. You're only going to find it exclusively here on Nate the Hate with MVG, because we think outside of the box. And when I really think of this idea to the fullest, like when we first saw the Switch reveal trailer and you had antisocial Karen, she was playing Mario Odyssey on her television and her friends were across the street on the rooftop saying, "Come on, come to our party." And she brought the Switch and she kickstand it out so they could play. Now all they would need is, let's say they had a TV sitting at that outdoor bar or a projector. I could just bring the Switch, wirelessly connect it, hand my friend the Joy-Con, boom.
Yep.
We're playing on a big screen TV, and it's seamless. It's fast. It's something that is very Nintendo. And I mean, obviously, this is just speculation. We're spitballing ideas here. But I think out of all of the concepts that we touched on of the digital only, TV only, Switch Pro, and now we'll call it the Switch Cast. I think the Switch Cast fits the information that Mike found of the secondary display exclusively on this particular hardware model. And I think it's the most exciting of the four options.
Yep. Yeah, me too. Like, as soon as you said it, I was like, holy shit, that's a great idea. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And hopefully that's what it ends up being, because yeah, that's a really cool idea.
I mean, I hope that's the path they go, because I think that's a pathway that they can move, forward with going into their next gen hardware, as long as they keep the Switch product line or the Switch form factor moving into the next gen. And it would still be something that, it doesn't counter what Microsoft and Sony are doing with cloud gaming. I think Nintendo would pursue cloud in their own way, but just being able to effortlessly cast the game to a TV. And if Nintendo does go, cloud, or Microsoft brings xCloud to the Switch as an application, being able to freely decide, am I going to play this in handheld or docked, without any extra effort, it's just very Nintendo. It's ingenious. It's something that the market doesn't know it wants yet. And that's where Nintendo excels, by giving you something you didn't realize you needed. And gaming, having a casting option, it makes sense. I mean, when we look at the Switch, it's the Wii U done right.
Yep.
And the Wii U did have, a type of casting feature. It was limited due to the range of the system itself. But if Nintendo has perfected that and they've been able to expand on it, I think this is the next step for the Switch as a product. This is smart advancement. And I mean, we may never see what the NX ABCD is. We still haven't seen NX ABCB, which was supposed to be the TV only one.
Right.
So again, just because code exists with code names and different profiles, it doesn't mean the product will ever get out of prototype. But it's exciting that maybe an idea of casting and having a wireless docking solution for the Switch is something that could possibly being experimented with. That sounds promising to me, that Nintendo could maybe be thinking of this idea, and it's far better than just releasing a new iteration that just focuses on better horsepower.
Yeah, I agree, Nate. I guess my only question is, when do you think we'll see this? I mean, we kind of think it's 2021, but another part of me thinks this is innovative enough that maybe it's not in this iteration of Switch. Maybe it's in the Switch V2 potentially, but that may be a while away. So it could be this iteration, but that's where I wonder, do you think this is because this is a game changer. It could be a game changer for them. So, do they unveil it, we'll say next year, holiday season or over the summer, or do they kind of, hold it close to their chest for a little longer and maybe announce it with a new generation?
That's tough to say because if I take Nintendo words literal, they said no new hardware in 2020. Now, let's assume Breath of the Wild 2 does not make 2020 and it launches in February, March, or April of 2021. If I'm Nintendo, I would launch this new form of hardware with a title as prestigious as Breath of the Wild 2.
Yeah.
It would excite people. You're going to buy the new hardware, even though it may not be doing anything new beyond the casting feature, but just being able to say, I can get rid of that damn dock.
Yeah.
And I can just do this, the simple wireless docking solution, and I'm going to pick up Breath of the Wild 2, or you make a Breath of the Wild 2 Switch. I could see them maybe doing it then, early 2021, because Nintendo always launches typically a new revision of their hardware with a big release, like the Switch Lite came out with Link's Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if they don't do it with a Breath of the Wild 2, I could see it in holiday 2021 with something like a Metroid Prime 4 if it's ready by then. I mean, who knows? That game is basically the Switch's The Last Guardian or Shenmue 3 or Final Fantasy 7 remake at this point.
Very true.
It will eventually come out. But I think it would mostly come down to timing for Nintendo of when do they have a big enough game to sell this new product with. And I mean, that's really anyone's guess if it could be early 2021, late 2021, or hell, maybe even early 2022, depending on when they do release a successor to the Switch line. And, that's something hopefully Nintendo gives some guidance on in the future. We have a general idea. I mean, I think it was earlier this year, they said they were halfway through with the Switch lifespan. I don't see the Switch getting 8 to 9 years just due to the advancements of mobile technology and the advancement alone with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Nintendo will have to release some new hardware by, I would estimate, late 2022, early 2023, if they do want to remain competitive. Because as fascinating as the concept of the Switch is, you do need to keep consumers engaged. And I mean, Animal Crossing is doing a great job of that right now. Everyone's stuck in their house and they love the idea of portable gaming or docked gaming with portable gaming as an option. So maybe the casting option of the wireless dock is enough to spark new interest once again, and you can buy yourself another 18 to 20 months. But I mean, we're speculating here. And if this is a product, I would guess if we were to hear from Nintendo about it, it wouldn't be until maybe January of next year, or if not, maybe not until May of next year when they do their fiscal report and they give guidance for that upcoming fiscal year. So, I mean, potentially the earliest we hear of such a device is May of 2021, which, I mean, it's 13 months from now.
Yep. Yeah, but the timing kind of makes sense to me, just because it's in version 10 firmware that was released just a few days ago, that doesn't mean there's a new hardware revision that's imminent around the corner. I mean, in general sense, developers need to get updated dev kits and information on how to target new hardware. So it's not the same as getting a brand new PS5 dev kit and being told, here, port this game to it. But when you get a new feature to work with or some new hardware that you have to target towards, time needs to be taken. So I think even because we've seen version 10 firmware with these new revisions or these new kind of hardware tidbits inside that firmware, doesn't necessarily mean, again, that something is coming out this year. I think your timeline sounds about right to me. And I do think that, last year we had the Lite, this year nothing, and I think next year sounds right, for a new piece of hardware to get unveiled by Nintendo. I think that makes a lot of sense. This year is an absolute write-off for many different reasons, but even before the pandemic, I don't think Nintendo was planning on anything. Sure, it's easy to say that, especially with the investors meeting and hindsight being 2020, but if you go back and listen to Nate and I talking, and even on Spawncast previously, we never felt like there was anything that was coming out this year anyway. And I do think that next year, does make sense for what we'll see come from Nintendo from hardware perspective.
Yeah, 2020 never seemed to be on the cards because when you really look at the announced lineup at this point, like you had Animal Crossing, you have Clubhouse Games, even though you have Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition coming out, the year still feels kind of, and this isn't meant in like a negative way, it feels casual. And
Yeah.
that's something that you're going to sell the light to
Yep.
more casual players, more affordable. You're selling to kids, maybe to older adults who aren't big time gamers. They want to play something like Clubhouse Games. So this year is good to let the light shine. Let that lower entry price justify itself with releases like Animal Crossing and Clubhouse Games and whatever's to come in the second half of 2020. So it never felt right. It was unnecessary for them to introduce another hardware iteration in 2020. 2021 always made more sense from a guidance perspective. And I've seen some analysts on Twitter, and they agree with that assessment. They sit there and say there's no reason for anything in 2020 right now. 2021 makes most sense, even when they do their internal guidance to advise investors of what Nintendo could be planning moving forward. It's just a very vocal audience on Twitter and YouTube and gaming forums who keep pounding that we need a Switch Pro in 2020 idea, and they'll keep pounding that drum until, well, it's not going to become reality, but they'll keep hoping it becomes reality.
Yeah.
And most of that's just, oh, PS5 and Xbox Series X are coming out this year. Nintendo has to counter that. No, they don't. The Switch is selling well. The Switch is selling at record pacing. What Nintendo needs to do to counter that is to continue to release must-have high-quality software. And a 3D Mario collection or an All-Stars 2 is exactly what you need, or Breath of the Wild 2. Those type of releases will counter the PS5 and Xbox Series X because those systems are going to come in at a $400 to $500 price point, and Nintendo is still going to be sitting there at least $100 or more lower than those two systems. And Nintendo has one hell of a library of software to offer you with Mario Kart 8, Breath of the Wild 1, Mario Odyssey, Smash Brothers, Animal Crossing, Xenoblade Chronicles, Fire Emblem, and the list goes on and on. Nintendo is in a fine situation. They don't need more powerful hardware to counter Microsoft and Sony. They may see a reduction in third-party ports, but it's not going to be significant enough because, Nintendo, they're getting some third-party support, but it's not overwhelmingly massive. EA remains absent, even with Burnout coming to it in I believe it's about 2 months from now. Activision does more of their family-oriented titles like the Spyro games and Crash Bandicoot. They still haven't brought over a Call of Duty. So simply releasing a more powerful Switch wouldn't fix those problems. They're still going to ignore the product with those particular franchises like Madden, Call of Duty, or like the Mass Effects. All those games aren't coming to the Switch, but the Switch can continue to get, the HD ports of things like BioShock and some last generation, remasters and such. And that's not a bad place to be. You still get Doom Eternal. Like, there's still a lot of good third-party software to look forward to, but the third-party situation with Nintendo is far bigger than just a power gap.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And pick the best of the 360 PS3 era games. Well, most of the best. Not everything will come across, but most of them will. And you've got studios like THQ Nordic or publishers like THQ Nordic buying up all the rights to all these older games. I think it's in a good place. And yeah, I mean, I don't think things really need to deviate from the plan too much until really, as mentioned, developers start to have struggles and troubles with the existing hardware. But I firmly believe that Nintendo are well and truly ahead of that, and they they already have a plan for, we'll say, the next 18 to 24 months on their roadmap as far as what they'll be releasing in the future.
So, in conclusion, we are both in agreement that we see that the code for the hardware profile NXABCD is a wireless docking switch.
Yes, yeah, I'm excited, man. Very exciting to hear that. Like, honestly, I didn't really think of that aspect. I just thought maybe the extreme low end, which, you know, like the Xbox SAD, where you've taken the light and you've slashed even further to cut the price, or go the high end. But again, I just don't feel like the high end is the right move at this time. So yeah, we'll say the Switchcast sounds like a really good plan for Nintendo, and I think it's a really good pick for sure.
So you heard it here first, folks. If Nintendo announces a wireless docking solution for the Nintendo Switch, you can go to Twitter and say, I heard it first on Nate the Hate with MVG. And that is how we will conclude tonight's discussion. As always, it is a pleasure having you here, MVG.
Thanks for having me on, man.
It was a fun discussion. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, give this video a like. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you didn't enjoy the video, give it a dislike. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast. I have to plug that at the beginning of the show. I continue to forget.
I'll
You can leave
remind
that
you
at
next
the
time, Nate.
Yes. Leave it in the comments below. MVG will remind me next time. And until next time, you have been embraced by hate.